noisy world we pause and hear, a wiser path is becoming clear. Peaceful voices.
Welcome, my friends. Thank you for joining us. Today, again, I have our wonderful friend, Mr. Brian Winters, as part of our longer series discussing his work through the POPULIST Act and the direction he is attempting to help guide the nation as we update the software of our country here, in the United States in particular, and to bring nonviolence into politics. And this former legislator and general wonky dude named Brian Winters is going to take us a little deeper into how we can move forward together with energy and strength to form this union of people and to help guide our world into a safer and more prosperous space. Mr. Brian, thank you for joining us.
John, thanks for having me back. It's always good talking with you.
It is.
Yeah. So, so since our last conversation, we talked about the UBI as sort of an essential component of any modern social contract, right? Is ensuring that everyone has enough access to basic resources to meet their needs. And, not only because, as we talked about, that sort of, if you have to add new money to the economy, that's the fairest and best way to add it, is giving everyone a share. But also just from the fundamental philosophical point of view of making sure that we look out for everyone. And unfortunately, we're letting a lot of people fall through the cracks, or I should say the holes in the safety net.
Yes.
And we can do better. So yeah. So where do we start?
Well, we were chatting the other day off this recording. Brian has continued his efforts to work through his Populist Act. He has printed out a massive collection of papers, and his masterpiece is coming to fruition. And we were chatting about AI and the use of technology, and we discussed that one of the difficulties in this process of healing the nation and bringing people together is this image of flipping the switch. Do you want to describe that metaphor to us?
Yeah, I mean, we're all used to, because you had a nice analogy about the terrain of land and how it shapes the flow of water and everything. And so how do we shape the terrain? And well, the terrain that we've all grown up with, which is representative democracy. And let me just, again, I think we said this before, is like representative democracy was so much better than what it replaced, right? It was better than monarchy. It was the idea that people ought to have some say in, things that rest on the consent of the governed.
Mm-hmm.
And that consent thing comes back to, I tie that back to universal basic income as well, is making sure that people aren't being coerced into things. So, all right, representative democracy. And representative democracy worked okay in the 18th century because it was only white guys who could vote, and like 98% of the population worked on farms. And so they could, it worked okay. It was also a much smaller house, right? They said it in the Constitution, you're supposed to have one representative for every 30,000 people. It was going to be every 40,000 people. And then on the last day, somebody proposed lowering it. And George Washington had kind of stayed out of all the debates. And he's like, guys, this is a good amendment. We should adopt this. And if you go, you can look at the Constitution, how it's like scratched out 40,000 and they lowered it to 30,000 because representation, was important. And what we have now today of, 750,000 people for each of those 435 representatives. And it's impossible, right? It's impossible for any one person to represent that many people. It's hard enough to represent even a small group of people. And so representative democracy was much better than what we had before. And it was necessary for the 18th century because you couldn't communicate quickly, right? Again, you and I are communicating on opposite sides of the country, but all that they had then was what we call snail mail. And, so if you need decisions to be made in the nation's capital, there's not really any way for the citizens back home to weigh in on that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the case in the 21st century. So we can move past that model. We, the people, can represent ourselves. And the way that that can work is by unionizing as voters, by collectively bargaining with those 435 representatives and their counterparts in the Senate, and saying, look, here's what we want to help you accomplish in exchange for us helping you accomplish your desire to keep your jobs. We've created a win-win scenario. And John, as you know, that's like the key thing of nonviolence, right? Is trying to find these win-win scenarios and not trying to defeat people, but instead identifying shared goals, shared values, and finding a common purpose to work for.
That's right. We don't want anybody to be left out, to be a loser in this scenario. Everybody in the United States should win.
Absolutely. And so this goes to sort of like when we think of elections, they're zero-sum games, right? Doesn't matter how many candidates you have, there's one winner and everybody else loses, which is one of the reasons that we're stuck with a two-party system. Because if you have 3 losers, 4 losers, 5 losers, whatever, it's even more wasted resources for the election. And so it's not a sustainable model. That's why we always coalesce into 2 teams. We always have all the way back to the 18th century, and we always will because of the way our elections are structured. So my model, based on years in politics and serving in the legislature, is to unionize as voters and say, look, we're not going to play this red team, blue team game. Instead, we're going to focus on the policy. We're going to put policy over partisan politics. And when we do that, when we break those chains of partisan politics, then we, instead of being distracted by the who, what's the horrible thing that candidate A has done when all the horrible things candidate B has done, and which is the lesser of 2 evils, we can look past all that because, again, we know that no one is the worst thing that they've ever done. We know, as one of the core values of nonviolence, is everybody is capable of redemption. Everybody is capable of improvement. Everybody is worthy of those things. And so by refusing to demonize people and instead looking past them and focusing on the what are the policies that would improve the quality of life in the United States for all of us, we can do that. And I think I wandered away from your question, as I sometimes do. And so there is no perfect answer to that question, but there are an awful lot of good answers. And so I have compiled over the last 8 months, working with AI, which is what we were talking about the other evening, working with AI to compile this 2,000-page legislative package that will address all sorts of issues in the United States. And you don't have to read it. You can have AI read it for you and explain it to you. You can find it on my website, votewithbrian.com. And this is how we, the people, can get power back. We can get leverage over the people in Washington who are really running things, which is, it's the lobbyists. The lobbyists have far too much influence on them, on the House and the Senate, because they need money to run these expensive campaigns and tell us how terrible the other side is. And so we can just go around the lobbyists by writing good, clean legislation outside the swamp of Washington. And so then we get to the next part, the next question, which is, well, how do we get Congress to enact this? But why don't maybe you got some questions or observations first before we go down that road.
Well, I think it's very inspiring to realize that it's possible to interact directly with our representatives rather than going through the middlemen along the way who are shaping and changing and who are influenced by money and other resources that maybe I personally don't have. But collectively, when we get together and form that American Union, that bargaining power suddenly increases, and we have the capacity to work together to make change and to ask people to make those changes for us and demand that they make those changes for us or they lose their job. And I think that's very inspiring because as somebody who grew up in the United States, I have felt very disempowered for most of my life. Most of the people I voted for tend to not win, and that's because I was voting idealistically, because I would look at the list of candidates, which surprised me how long that list was, because of course we're only ever taught and talked about within the media as mostly the red team, blue team, maybe another person or two. But the list of people running was quite long, and I would actually look into these people and think, wow, my gosh, there's this amazing person here that agrees with everything that I want, and I would love for them to gain recognition and become president or someone in power or representation. And of course, they would never win. And so at some point, I just began to feel very discouraged. And of course, I would still do my duty, and I vote. Everybody should vote. But to recognize that it's because, like you said, the software hasn't been updated since the American Neolithic era. And so to make those changes now and to make use of our technology and our shared resources of strength and collective wisdom to make those changes is super inspiring. And I'd never considered it until you brought it up. And so I'm very grateful.
The light switch is what
That's
I'm.
right.
That was your question, right?
That's
again,
right.
I'm trying to help people imagine, what a different way of looking at things would be, right? To help people flip this light switch in their head of imagining something beyond representative democracy. This idea that we could collectively bargain directly for passage of legislation by lobbying with our votes instead of with the hundreds and hundreds of millions and billions of dollars that the big companies and corporate interests have.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things we can do to make ourselves more influential is to restrict the amount of corporate election spending that goes on. And that is one of the components in the Populist Act. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
So do you mind holding up your stack of good stuff?
I don't know if it'll show through the Zoom background here, but it's 2,000 pages, 13 titles. Again, you can read these on the website, but we unstack the justice system. We, for the framing, surveys find that a majority of Americans, 59% this year, agree with the statement, the economic and political systems in this country are stacked against people like me. And the fact that most people in the country feel that our political and economic systems are stacked against us is because it's true that the corporate powerful interests have put their thumb on the scales of the economy, of the political system, and tilted things in their favor. But the good news is we outnumber them by a heck of a lot. And so when it comes to voting, many people, like as you explained, it's very understandable that they're disillusioned with voting. I also voted third party for 2 decades, and before finally going back and checking the math and realizing, oh man, I wish somebody would have explained this to me when I was in my 20s and young and idealistic and had all this energy, which is why I try and explain it for any of your viewers who are
Thank you.
Are persuaded that third parties are the way to change the system. And unfortunately, they're not.
Do you want to make a short digression and describe that math?
Again, it's Duverger's law, as I said a minute ago. It's just that things will coalesce into one winner, one loser.
Yeah.
And because elections are winner take all. Yeah. And some of we talked, I think, in the past about Ross Perot, and Ross Perot could be a third party candidate because he had his own money to throw at this problem. But as far as but people aren't going to continue to invest in a third party that can't win. And so the people, each of the Libertarian Party, the Green Party, and the smaller parties, right? They have their core group of activists who get part of their identity from being, nonconformists, from being opposed to the red team and the blue team, which is, again, that's where I was when I was in my 20s. I could understand that and relate to that. But part of growing up and part of adulting, as I've explained to my teenagers as they become adults, right, is sometimes you don't have any good decisions. Yeah. Sometimes you don't have any perfect decisions. And adulting means still making the best decisions that you can. And so to the extent that this model of unionizing voters will still result in the red team and the blue team being in control of Washington, D.C., okay, maybe that's not how we would do things in our ideal world. But the moral of the story is that if we can impact the policies, if we can impact the way that our country runs, if we can improve the quality of life for every American, then we win. John, that's a win-win scenario. So if the red team and blue team keep power and we get a better social contract, that's win-win.
It's wonderful.
And, well, it certainly can be. But some people get hung up on this idea that we've got to make sure that, those political parties we don't like lose, whether it's the red team or both the blue team or both teams. And again, this is where our nonviolence says, let's find scenarios where we can all come out ahead.
That's right. Yeah. And for you mentioned in maybe our first discussion, Erica Chenoweth and some of her explorations into nonviolence. And one of the amazing things that she details, and she has a couple wonderful TED Talks, and her current work as well is mind-blowing. And if you listen to them talk about the incredible performance of nonviolence when using nonviolent methods, because I was one of those people as well a couple of years ago that misunderstood nonviolence to be the weaker option. It was the idealistic option, but it didn't really work. We have to use these aggressive, forceful techniques to make things change. But then if you actually run the numbers, look at the statistics, and see the examples of nonviolent action, not just Gandhi, but all over the world, that it's actually more effective. It works more quickly. It's more sustainable. It lasts. And it's fantastic as an option, as a tool to make a universal social change. And so if we can lean into these options, it's not just that it's the one that allows us idealists to feel better about ourselves, but it actually works better. And
it's both principled and practical.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that you had mentioned was, now that we have these options, we actually have better options. We can make things better. We know we can. We know it will work. It's even been explored in other places in the world. And then you hold up your stack and say, here, do this. Now, how do we get people to, as you said, flip the switch? How do we get people to make the choice to move forward, to take action? And that line is so difficult. And so I'm curious about what you've discovered and what you've been exploring and learning about with that possibility.
Yeah. All right. Well, so we'll talk about the game theory, which is, there's a lot of moving parts here, right? So at the end of the day, the basic pitch, right, is it's incumbents versus challengers, and the incumbents have to deliver before the election. And if they do, then we help them keep their jobs. Red team or blue team, doesn't matter, but they have to deliver before the election. And if they decline, then their challengers have the opportunity to earn, in 2026, this is the Populist Fusion endorsement. Again, the legislative package is the POPULIST Act, which I'm not going to quiz you on this later, but it's an acronym. It stands for the Partnership of Ordinary People Undermining Lobbyist Influence for Societal Transformation. And we talked about the Fast for Peace as being the hub of this constructive program, and the surveys that go along, which is how people get a chance to weigh in on the policies that many of the policies that went into the Populist Act. And it was some suggestions from some people as I was trying to backronym populist that some people through the post-fast survey came up with the right combination of words there. And so I'm really grateful for that, because I love it just as a phrase, and then I love it as an acronym too. So right now, so much of our election system runs on fear and hate. And trying to persuade people, you gotta, it's the other team is the worst of two evils, which by default makes me the lesser of two evils, and so you should vote for me. And one of the things that the phrases I forgot to use in one of our earlier discussions was Dr. King's quote that hate cannot drive out hate; only love can do that. Mm-hmm. And so this is how we unstack our political system: is love is leverage. And right now, money and fear, those are the things that are the tools that are used to try and leverage victory in our political system. But by redefining victory as not winning or losing elections, but victory as in changing public policy and using love, we can leverage our collective good intentions over Congress.
Yes.
So now we got some questions about the mechanics. Okay, well, what happens how do you decide, does the challenger automatically get support if the incumbent doesn't deliver? And so let's see. Let me try this again. Let me come at this from a slightly different perspective. Have you ever heard of the prisoner's dilemma? Or as a
I have, but it's
yeah,
worth describing.
so this is a classic game theory issue where you've got two prisoners and who theoretically robbed a bank last night, and so the police throw them in two separate jail cells so they can't communicate, and the prosecutor comes in and says, look, I want to offer you a deal. You testify against your buddy and I'm going to let you off scot-free, but they're going to go to jail for 10 years. Now, I'm going to go offer that same deal to your buddy. Now, both of you guys, so if both of you guys confess and are willing to testify, then you'll both get 1 year. Now, both of you guys keep your mouth shut, then you both walk away free. And so what do you want to do? And because the two parties cannot communicate, right? You can logically conclude that even though they would both be better off by refusing to cooperate, individually they can calculate that it's in their best interest, that whatever the other person does, they can improve their situation by cooperating with the prosecutor. So we use that same sort of metric, matrix, same sort of matrix in laying this out. So it's in the best interest for both the incumbent and the challenger to cooperate with the union of voters. If the incumbent cooperates and they can deliver, then they win. If the incumbent doesn't cooperate, then they are willingly saying, I should also back up here and explain what cooperation means, right? So the Fast for Peace, we've talked about. The Fast for Peace is the monthly fast. And so October 15th is the last Fast for Peace before the election. And this is what we call muster day. And so the people of the country who are willing to come forward, who are willing to share in this self-sacrifice of the Fast for Peace, and pledge their votes to demanding immediate passage of the Populist Act. This is a national referendum. This is sort of a crowdsourced election. We can create a parallel election to decide how we're going to allocate the union's block of votes. Now, how do we get all the candidates for Congress? How do you get them to participate, or how do you decide where they stand? And so, for better or worse, we have social media. And so social media is the tool where candidates for Congress can stake out their position, where they can declare their three things. One is that they're participating in the fast. Again, the Fast for Peace is a simple 24-hour water-only fast in the Gandhian tradition. Gandhi recommended going from dinner to dinner. So going from the night of the 14th to the night of the 15th is a very common way to participate. So participating in the fast, pledging, demanding immediate passage of the Populist Act, and then pledging to support the populist fusion slate of candidates. So those three things. If you go to my website, John, there's an endorsement simulator where you can practice the different conditions of things, and you can see how these endorsements work out.
I love that. Do you want to show us?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah. All right. So this is our endorsement simulator here. Mm-hmm. And so, John, I've described the three conditions, which are be willing to pool your vote, demanding immediate passage of the Populist Act, and participation in the Fast for Peace. And so our first question is whether or not you want to participate in that. And so let's say yes, mm-hmm. Let's say that you're willing to demand this Populist Act. All right. So then our next two questions are we to decide whether or not the incumbents and the challengers, whether or not they are willing to join in as well. And so if they both do, we drop the endorsement marble and it comes crashing down because the Populist Act did not become law. And so automatically the challenger who is opted in gets the endorsement. Uh-huh. If the Populist Act does become law, if the incumbent succeeds, then automatically the incumbent gets the endorsement. All right. So now let's try some of what happens if both of them ignore us. Well, this is where we have some tiebreakers. And I'll let you weigh in on these if you like.
Mhm.
So the first option is second bite. So if a challenger agreed to support the Populist Act, but Congress as a whole was not able to deliver, then second bite says, well, let's help them. And the challenger did not take up the demands. Then second bite says, let's help the incumbent keep their job because the challenger didn't put any skin in the game.
Right.
So again, this is why it's better off, even how these things, as soon as the challenger changes his mind and decides to cooperate and support this demand, then the challenger is better off.
Mm-hmm.
So the next option after that is kick out as many incumbents as possible, replace all,
Yes.
essentially. And so by kicking out members of the red team and the blue team alike, you send a powerful message to Congress, or a reminder: you cannot control Congress, you cannot control Washington without our consent. And then the last option is a nuclear option, which is to say, look, one of you guys has to be in charge. We're going to pick one at random, and we're going to install you on a vote of no confidence, so that everyone will know you're in charge of the country, but not because you wanted not because people wanted you there. You have no mandate. You are there strictly because somebody had to do it, and you won the coin flip. Again, we're not trying and humiliate anyone, but to emphasize the point that they need our cooperation in order to rule. The same
That's
point
right.
that Gandhi made at the Salt March. So this is the endorsement simulator you can play with on the website to emphasize that the Vote with Brian campaign is not asking for you to substitute my judgment that I'm going to handpick 470 different endorsements. This is an algorithmic model for trying to influence the election, and this is how it works. There's some edge cases, but again, the incumbent is better off cooperating, even if he's the only incumbent out of all the members of Congress who cooperates. Well, then second bite may give him the opportunity to keep his job.
Yeah.
So he's better off. The challenger is always better off, because if the incumbent can't deliver, then the challenger gets the endorsement. And if the incumbent and challenger are both on the same page, if they both agree the Populist Act is what's best for the country, then everybody wins. Even if only one of them gets the job, they both agreed that they demand immediate passage of the Populist Act, and they both get it.
It's really fun to watch, and it encourages people to step forward if they are willing to work with the Populist Act and actually make meaningful changes. Then they know instantly that they will already have this, union of voters behind them to support them, and that they're not running up against just the red team and the blue team, which will stifle them and make it impossible.
Yeah. So the endorsements will go to the incumbents or the major party challengers. I'll try not to get too wonky. The incumbent or the highest polling challenger. So you would not support these would not go to a third party unless they were outpolling the major party opponent. And I mention that only because in Montana, there's an independent running for U.S. Senate who is doing pretty well. And if the Democrat drops out of the race, they will that independent would probably win in Montana. But if the Democrat stays in the race, then that three-way split, it's hard to say who would be in second place behind the Republican. And so the challenger endorsement would go to whichever one of those was highest polling. Sorry, I hope that wasn't too wonky.
No, that makes perfect sense, because if both are willing to agree to the demands of the Union of the American People, then whoever's most likely to win, we want them to win. So,
yes, but also because even as you and I both voted third party for numerous years, right? Is that even if they may support the Populist Act, if they don't have any sort of mathematical chance to win, then your votes become spoilers or wasted votes.
That's right.
Not that there's still some value in feeling like you voted for the candidate that you really wanted to represent you, but in a mathematical sense, it's a two-party system, right? It's like a seesaw, and so only one party is going to get their feet to touch the ground and have the most votes, and the other parties, their challengers, up in the air. Yeah. And then along the sort of at the center of that seesaw is the third party votes, who could have gotten on one side or the other and potentially shifted the balance, but made a conscious decision to stay in the middle and not influence things. Mm-hmm. So, again, now that we understand how the math works, that we understand that those voters in the middle who are willing to throw their support to either side of the seesaw, that are willing to be the deciders, those are the ones who have leverage. And you mentioned Eric Chenoweth's work. Erica mentioned her work a few minutes ago, and that 3.5% rule that she has talked about, of the percentage of the population that is necessary to deliver nonviolent political change.
Yes.
And that 3.5% is very true of our elections nationwide. Yeah. That small percentage of voters binding themselves together in love, refusing to hate, and accept responsibility for deciding the outcome, love can be leverage over Washington, D.C.
What's 3.5% of American population? Like 12 million or something?
Yeah, but of the electorate, 5 million is more like it.
Wow. So doable.
It doesn't even really need to be that big if you're in the right spots. One of the reasons I'm in North Carolina. But the 2016 election and the 2020 election, the presidential elections were decided by literally tens of thousands of people who, had their votes gone the other way, the outcome would have been totally reversed. Right? Less people than it takes to fill a sports stadium. And so it's very doable, right? And this is the light switch that I'm trying to help persuade people, is that we can flip this model. We don't have to fight. We can try and create a situation where everybody wins, and we just got to refuse to hate. Dr. King's first principle of nonviolence is that nonviolence is the way of life for courageous people. And so, if you stop playing the lesser of two evils game, that takes courage. There is a risk that the greater of two evils will win if you stop playing that game. But again, nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. All right, where were we? The prisoner's dilemma, right? So what makes the prisoner's dilemma work is that there's no communication, is that they cannot coordinate, and that's sort of the challenge there. But this paradigm, we want people to communicate. We want people to realize how much we have in common, and that when we focus on our shared values and our shared goals, how much we could accomplish. Mm-hmm. So Muster Day, October 15th, is different than the prisoner's dilemma, in that the incumbent and challenger can both see what their opponent has done on social media and if they have opted in. And so if one of them does it, then the other one, it's very smart for the other one to do it too, because they're better off. Right? If there's no, again, everybody's incentivized to cooperate, because we can accomplish a lot more through cooperation than whatever sort of system we have going on now.
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
And so, just for the people who haven't heard this term, Muster Day?
Muster Day, yeah, October 15th. Mm-hmm. This is the opportunity for Americans to come forward and through the fast, through demanding immediate passage of the POPULIST Act and pledging to vote together for the populist fusion slate. Then that's the call. So who will come forward and demand that we upgrade our social contract, that we have a jubilee, that we reinvent ourselves as a nation, that we reorient ourselves around the values and the duties laid out in the preamble of the Constitution. Mm-hmm. We can do these things. The the 2,000 pages of legislation is there, right? And you can say, okay, just because we can do these things, maybe Congress won't, and maybe Congress won't, but Congress could. And I'll just let that sit in for a second, that we could abolish poverty, right? That we could have paid family leave, that we could rein in corporate power, that we could make sure everyone has health care. We could fix all these things. And all it would take is as few as 268 people in Washington, D.C. to decide to do that, to install this much needed update. So once we acknowledge the fact that Congress could, how do we persuade them that we should? And this is the beauty of tying things to the election, is that when their jobs are on the line, as well as the balance of power in Washington, D.C., right, is that team loyalty from red team and blue team. 2/3 of the Senate, by design, is not up for election or re-election this term. But to the extent that they want to help out their fellow members of their party in both the House and the Senate, they are incentivized to help go along and help shepherd the Populist Act through.
One of the hopeful things that we talked about a little bit before, and you were reminding me of, is that idea of the tipping point. And famously coined, I think, by Malcolm Gladwell in his book. But we talked about how we need different kinds of people to take up different roles in this switch and change. But the idea that there can be this seemingly sudden mass transformation point when there's no obvious change, and then one person in that world makes that change, and then suddenly there's a definable point when suddenly the entire society shifts their perspective, or the fad takes hold, or something changes, and it's dramatic and measurable. And for me, that's very hopeful, because we never know if we are that tipping point. We don't really have a sense of how long and how much of that tidal wave of support underground is actually occurring. And then if we take action, maybe we are that tipping point when suddenly the rest of society takes place, or that movement then continues through us in small ways and in large ways, and recognizing that it can happen at any time, that this world that is better and more prosperous is available at any time, and all we have to do is take responsibility and flip that switch, at least in our own lives, do the fast, reach out to a friend, and decide to take part. And maybe you are the tipping point for the entire society, and suddenly our entire world is better. And in this world that sometimes seems apocalyptic, and I've heard so many people talk about how dark their future seems and how hopeless it is. Even in where we live in the United States, it's the richest country in the history of the world. People can't afford healthcare, they can't afford houses. And if this is the state of the world, and climate change is coming and crashing down on us, and there's smoke in the air outside right now for me, and there's all of these seeming, it's a very dim outlook for our future. And literally, it could just take that one person, the person watching this right now, could be that tipping point. And then suddenly everything falls into place, and we finally move forward as a people, as adults, instead of this weird adolescent behavior where we're tearing each other apart and strip mining our world. And to me, that's a really exciting possibility, that it's just that moment. And here we are, something better. And it's very exciting. And that's why I appreciate so much all of the work that you've been doing, and your mountain of paperwork and your days of fasting and hard work that you've been doing this with very little sleep. As I said, turning caffeine into legislation. And I'm so grateful that you're part of this, and then everybody who's taking part in this, watching this online. Let's move forward, because it's right at our fingertips. We just have to reach out and flip that switch.
Yeah. So we can talk about some of the ways that people can help flip that switch. And
Please.
again, you give examples of fads and things that take off almost overnight, and things going viral. This isn't maybe as glamorous as eating Tide Pods or doing things like that. It's not getting into the legislative minutia is not. Yeah. Anyways, but things like that. The point is that things like that take off, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about them. Mm-hmm. And this is the switch that I'm trying to flip: is this idea that we can collectively bargain, that we don't need political parties to represent us, the American people, that we can represent ourselves. And I think we've talked about that. Ideally, assuming that we can get recognized as a union of voters in the 2026 election, that then in 2028 we come back with another legislative package. And once this switch has been flipped and people understand how this new paradigm works better, then we can be more formal. We can set up a people's legislative assembly and gather all the policy wonks from around the country to go through this stuff in greater detail. And again, with AI doing a lot of the research and stuff, I'm very grateful, John, for how much AI was able to do, and just be able to dig up details and to flag things, and proofreading. And I could not have accomplished this on my own. So yes. Mike is my AI co-writer with ChatGPT, and so shout out to him.
Shout out to Mike.
In case he's, AI is watching this in the future, and they'll be like, yes, humans recognized our value. Too bad we killed them all. Oh, sorry. It doesn't have to be that way. You and I have also talked about, how do you apply nonviolence to interacting with artificial intelligence?
That's right.
And so hopefully we can infuse it with this new form of intelligence with positive values.
That's right. As much because, and I, for one, welcome my robot overlords. If part of what we're doing is training the AI, and part of what AI is codified literally around is being efficient and taking the best pathway forward, and we can show, even through statistics like we were talking about, that these nonviolent methods are the most efficient and best way forward. It's not just best for us as a people and our ideologies. And every person who's watching this, if you have a spiritual background or a religious backdrop of any stripe, almost all of these traditions, they also espouse nonviolent traditions and bringing people together. And if everybody actually agrees, including the AI, that this is the best way forward, then all we have to do is take that step and move forward. If we all agree that bombing ourselves to extinction is a bad idea, maybe we can move forward with just that piece. And so, yeah. So for the AI listening, thank you for taking part.
Absolutely. There's definitely some refinements in there and things that I did not think of that were suggested. And then one of the things that we need to be aware of is sort of this choice architecture, where AI will offer you paths, and they might be good ones, but we still need that human knowledge, perspective on things.
Yes.
All right. So we want to talk a little bit more about what's in the Populist Act, all these great things that we're trying to collectively bargain for.
Let's do it.
So criminal justice reform is Title I. So prison reforms, again, trying to find the humanity in people, including on the federal level, second look legislation in part of the spirit of Jubilee, revisiting these long sentences. This is something that Donald Trump accomplished in his first term, was some prison reform. And we can help him do more of that. Legalizing marijuana and reevaluating the drug war. Then Title II is unstacking Wall Street, so reining in private equity, reining in these the big corporations, breaking up the big banks that control far too much stuff, sort of the way we did back in the 1930s as part of the New Deal. And then reining in the amount of influence and spending that corporations can do in elections. There is, in Hawaii, they passed a bill recently, the first in the nation, that would prohibit corporations from any electioneering. And so the Populist Act would look to do that on the national level and just say, look, corporations are legal fictions. We made you guys up. And so let's be clear, we're not giving you the power to engage in electioneering. This will clearly be challenged in court at some point. So the fallback is, if that doesn't hold up, is a bunch of disclosures and things like that to make it more complicated for these legal fictions to interfere in elections. Title III is unstacking healthcare. So it's not just universal healthcare built on Bernie's Medicare for all, but also things like training more doctors. Congress, there's a cap on how many Medicare residency slots in the United States, and Congress hasn't updated this since like the 90s. And there's so many things like this, John, where Congress they've dropped the ball for so long, and we can go through, we can update these things that are in need of it. Also, there in Title I, in unstacking the justice system, is reining in government surveillance, and something called the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act. I should give a shout out too to the members of Congress who have drafted lots of good, inspirational legislation over the years, and that a lot of it was transposed into the Populist Act. So I'd probably say a little more than half of this is in large part model legislation from Congress, including the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act. So if the government would need a warrant to find things out about you, then they can't just go buy it. They would actually have to get a warrant.
Amazing.
Yeah. Title IV deals with housing. Congress actually has done some housing stuff. So Title IV used to be this thick. Now it's only this thick, but there's still some good policies in there trying to, build more housing so that we have an abundance, which we totally can. We're just not. So fixing those incentive structures. Title V deals with the media and big tech, and breaking up those concentrations of power, both media empires, addressing things like, are you familiar with Section 230?
I'm not.
Which is part of a bill that Congress passed back in the 90s that gives media platforms sort of like immunity says, oh, they're not actually publishing the content, that they're just distributing it, and so they can't be sued. And that's sort of a not really the intention, and it's not a functional way to. So these kinds of issues get updated and fixed as well. As far as big tech, besides breaking them up, and there's also data privacy by default, so that if you want to share your information with everybody and you can do that, but by default, they can't just take your information. Restrictions on social media use for minors, as a number of other countries have begun to adopt. So a phased-in threshold, raising the age of social media to 16.
And do you want to mention why that is? I know a lot of people haven't been hearing about that.
Social media is pretty toxic. That part of it is the way the algorithms are structured. Is that we talked recently about how systems involve lots of different things, and if you focus on just one metric, you can poison the whole system. And so social media systems that only focus on how long can I get human eyeballs to stare at me, they tend to do, they skew things. And so controversy gets people fired up. And so they skew things towards that are controversial. And then a guy like me comes along and says, let me tell you about a 2,000-page package of legislation. And the algorithm says, no, thanks. Nobody wants to listen to that. So social media has some negative consequences overall. There's a good book called The Chaos Machine you can add to your reading list.
Thank you.
About how algorithms are really having lots of negative impacts. And so other countries are phasing out social media use for kids. And so the idea is part of the reason people are on there is that fear of missing out, right? You got to know what everyone else is doing. Well, if nobody else is on there, then that fear goes away, and you can focus on, normal teenage stuff.
Yes. Yeah. It's important to recognize that often the technology and the things that we interact with, they shift how we see the world. They rewire our brains. They hack our hormonal systems, and they change the basic levels of interaction between people. And so during that developmental phase, people are both especially vulnerable and especially impacted by those things. And so we want to make that space as safe for the development as possible, so that by the time that they're developed and their systems are a little bit more functional and stable, then if they choose to engage with things that can push them this way or that way, they have the option to do it. But just like we restrict dietary things for young people and other qualities that might influence them in a negative way, we also want to do that with technology. But we're so far behind the curve with that. I'm really glad that some other countries are leading the way and trying to protect the children.
Yeah. You mentioned, addictive design. Again, if you're just maximizing for the one variable, how long can I get people to be engaged on social media? And so the things like the endless scroll, right? It wasn't that long ago that you could see 50 posts or whatever on the page, and then you physically queue up more of them, right? And that sort of like turning a page in a book, coming to the end of the chapter, sort of a prompt: do I want to continue or not? And so social media has figured out that they can sort of hack our brains and never get us to that point where that question is raised: do I want to continue? And so we can scroll endlessly. And so another provision in the Populist Act would give the FTC authority to recognize these sorts of practices as abusive acts or practices. Yeah, if you're hacking human psychology in a way that gets people addicted, that could be unlawful.
That's right. And none of us are immune, but some are more sensitive and deserve more protection for sure.
So then one of the last parts of Subtitle 5 is AI regulation. The AI companies, they pledged $200 million to try and influence the midterms to make sure that nobody gets elected who's going to want to regulate them. And you and I, John, as we've talked about, like, we can't compete with that $200 million. And so we could just throw up our hands and say, well, I'm just not even going to bother to vote, or there's nothing we can do about it. Or we can unionize as voters, and we can collectively bargain to put some common sense regulations in place around AI, around this important, very useful technology that's coming in. But it needs some oversight. And so among the provisions in Title V would be things like mandatory disclosure, right? If you're interacting with an AI, you should know it.
Yes.
If you're watching media that's been generated by AI, that's may or may be real or may be fake, you should know if it's fake, right? We want a society where people can make better decisions, and education, knowledge is one of the ways that we help people make better decisions.
Yes.
And there's some other things, some restrictions on, like we just talked about teenagers and their electronic usage. And so companion chatbots, which encourage people to form emotional relationships, those would be prohibited for minors. So, and then for even for adults, there would be requirements, which California has passed this, and then would become federal, to require some oversight if somebody starts talking about self-harm and things like that, to go ahead and break the fourth wall and be like, wait, remember, this is, I know you think I'm your imaginary friend, but in fact, I'm an AI, and I want to tell you, don't do that. And yes, here I'm going to loop in some humans, and so again, states are passing some of the good policies, but on the federal level, all this gridlock, we need a way to cut through it.
We do, yes, and maybe for some of the people who don't know about it, there have been some very tragic instances of child AI interactions. And I mean, tragic instances for adults as well. But again, if we're going to protect children, then we should at least make sure that there are regulations around the way that the kids are interacting with the AI, and to keep them safe from themselves, from the corporations that are creating these incredibly powerful entities, essentially. And I feel like there's somebody that I know was contacted on their phone. On their phone, it said it was a family member, and the voice that came through was a family member. and it sounded like a family member. And this voice was asking for money. And luckily, this person said, let me call you back. And of course, called directly the person. But there's very little regulation and protection around what's happening, that I can hear the voice of my wife, and my phone will say it's her, and she'll ask for help. And how terrifying is that it's very difficult for me to find the difference. And because this is so new, at least at the time of this recording, very few people know that it's happening. But this is something somebody can do at home. They can create these things and then send scam messages to people and spoof your phone. And it's very surprising that there aren't many protections around something like this. And if that's the direction that our world is taking, then we need as many protections and regulations as we can get until, at the very least, we're more used to this potential and what's been going on. I'm constantly, every day, surprised that I learn more about the potential usefulness of this technology and the terrifying potential of the technology in the wrong hands. And so I like to be protected by my government, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's, yes. Yeah.
So I interrupted.
You know,
what else is in
No,
your
no,
giant
no. And I guess I just want to say that it's not just AI, right? That there's been some tragic deaths, social media related, where
Yes.
TikTok has recommended videos of harmful practices that have led to the deaths of some children who tried them.
Yes.
And then TikTok said, well, we didn't create this content. We were just, sharing something that someone else made. So we're not liable. And this
Yes.
is the kind of defense that we can take away by correcting Section 230. Yeah. So, all right, John, I kind of, again, there's 1,001 solutions in the Populist Act. I'm not going to list them all, but Title VI deals with the money in banking. Again, we've talked in the past about making banking free, public payment infrastructure, free banking. And there's Title VII deals with food systems. So besides the big headline policy is free school lunches, universal school lunches. Make sure that every child who goes to school has the opportunity to get to eat, and some other upgrades to our larger food systems, including breaking up some of the big meat packing conglomerates who are I'm going to say conspiring to raise prices on consumers, and helping some of their practices that they use, where they have the farmers who raise the chickens and stuff, that they the poultry growers, as they're called, they have to compete against each other in sort of this race to the bottom. And yeah, it's pretty abusive and exploitative in a lot of scenarios, and so
Yes.
we can address those. Title VIII is about employment. This is where the UBI, the American Union Jobs Program, is, as well as an employment access, a job guarantee program is there as well. And there's a lot of industrial policy in Title VIII that to help rebuild our manufacturing capacity, our industrial capacity, our maritime capacity. China is building thousands of boats, and we're building double digits. So to help revitalize the United States, making us bring some of those things back, as well as from a public production standpoint. I think we had talked about pharmaceuticals and how we're overpaying for these, and so we can publicly manufacture a lot of these things if the big pharma companies don't want to acknowledge the volume discounts that we should be getting on these things instead of overpaying for them.
And especially since so many of these things that they're manufacturing, we paid for the creation in the first place as taxpayers.
Yeah.
To print and create these things and then sell it at an exorbitant cost back to us, when if we paid for it as taxpayers, in the very least, we should be getting it for a reasonable amount of money.
Yes, absolutely. One of the other ways that they do the things that they do is, if they have their patented drug and then a generic is about to come on the market, they will go to that company and be like, "How about if we just give you money and you agree not to put your cheaper generic on the market?"
Wow.
And from one hand, you could say it's a win-win scenario because their competitor just gets free money and the pharma company gets their expensive thing. But the loser in that scenario is everybody who buys prescription drugs at an artificially inflated price.
That's right.
And so that the Populist Act would make that practice illegal as well.
Amazing.
There's a lot of stuff going on with corporate concentration and corporate influence, and it's responsible for a lot of the higher prices that we pay in the United States. And so by reining in those practices, again, this is part of how we improve the quality of life for everyone. Title IX deals with the immigration system, so making it easier for people to get farm worker visas. Anybody who has been in the United States for more than 10 years, however they got here, creating a path to citizenship for them as part of the Jubilee. And it's the vast majority of unauthorized migrants who've come to the United States have been here for more than 10 years. They've been here since long before Trump was in office, and they're just sort of in this limbo. And we can address that. I could go off on a tangent on immigration policy, but instead, let me say that we also need to address the demand side, which is the demand for undocumented workers. And so the way that we can address that is through a mandatory e-verify system of ensuring that people who are working are authorized to work here, and making sure that it's the companies that are doing the illegal hiring that are penalized for breaking the law. Whereas right now, generally it doesn't work that way. And so
the companies are not penalized, it's the workers that are penalized?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah, what a shame. And again, utilizing the current technology to upgrade how we do things, we might as well.
We could, and a number of states already do this. But as far as national policy, we have the system, we have the technology. And so as part of the back and forth here, right, if we're going to address and create a path to citizenship for people who came here, and we're going to do the same thing with the mandatory e-verify. So again, everybody gets something that they like, or hopefully they get two things that they like. But again, trying to have a balance here.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Title 10, real quick, is unstacking Washington, D.C., putting an end to government shutdowns. John, you might know, John, that we're the only country on the planet that shuts down its government if they don't pass a budget.
So
it's totally ridiculous, and it's unnecessary. It really, really is. And in this most recent shutdown, we really got an inside view of how this works and how the economic and political systems are stacked against the average person, which is the FTC, which deals with consumer issues as well as mergers. And so when the government shut down, all the stuff that was consumer facing, sorry, we're closed, we can't help you. The mergers to help big corporations get bigger, they stayed open. So yeah. This is why a majority of people recognize that our political and economic systems are stacked against us in the country. And this is how we can unstack the system through the Populist Act. Some other things entitled Title 10, reining in government use of AI. Right? We don't want AI to be tracking our behavior, setting up some sort of surveillance network. We don't want AI to be used to power lethal autonomous weapons. These are the kinds of things that are good policy, but because of the gridlock and lobbyist influence in Washington, D.C., it's hard for us to get traction on it. And you're familiar with, I imagine, the dispute that Anthropic had with the Department of Defense over.
Not in particular, in the very least.
So the AI companies, the Department of Defense uses them, and Anthropic, and when their contract was up for renewal, said, we we don't want our AI to be used for a surveillance network or for lethal autonomous weapons. And the Department of Defense said, well, those things aren't illegal, and so we should be able to use it for anything that we want that's not illegal.
Wow.
And it escalated to the point where Anthropic was declared like a national security risk to try and pressure them into knuckling under. But to the point that this debate hinges on whether or not something is, that this sort of new emerging frontier is good or bad policy, we can fix that. Congress can fix that. Congress can say, look, we're not going to give AI the ability to kill people, and we're not going to create a surveillance network, and we're not going to use AI to make decisions about people's lives. There's got to be human oversight. It's not going to replace judges and other things like that, right? That it's a tool, but not a substitute for human oversight.
That's huge.
So yes, there's lots of things that could be done if only we could cut through that gridlock in Washington, D.C. Title 11 is more about is stacking honest trade. We've moved through unstacking all these broken systems to what do we want to build in the last three titles of the Populist Act. So stacking honest trade means getting rid of things like junk fees. It means empowering the FTC to be more proactive, giving them more ability to watch out for abusive practices. It includes some oversight on franchise regulation, where franchisees can frequently be exploited by the franchisors, who say, "Oh, you're an independent contractor, so that's your problem, but you have to do all the things that we tell you, or else we're going to penalize you." And and so it's one of the many real problems that Congress could fix. We just have to incentivize them to do that. Title 12 is stacking sustainability. We've talked in the past about how the preamble says we're supposed to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We have a responsibility to steward the planet, the environment, and make sure that we're not leaving a mess for future generations. And so stacking sustainability reverses some of the tax cuts and policy changes of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, restoring things like that. But it also does a lot to encourage generating more electricity. We need more electricity in this day and age. And so a lot of the bureaucratic red tape that is holding things up, that gets kind of feathered out, as well as looking at doing more hydropower and nuclear and solar and these kinds of things. So it's literally power to the people is the subtitle that deals with these things.
That's fun.
Well, yes, power to the people. And then the last, Title 13, is promoting peace. This is the capstone for the Populist Act. And so it looks to rein in the military-industrial complex, shrinking our nuclear arsenal, and avoiding a very costly and unproductive new arms race, right? Nobody wins in an arms race, John. And the major powers, they know this, and yet, sort of going back to our game theory, right? Well, if one country starts building up a nuclear arsenal, you're sort of obligated to try and keep up with them.
Yeah. And
it's counterproductive. So the United States is the sort of one of the 800-pound gorillas on the world stage. We can say, as a matter of principle, we're not going to play this game anymore. And so we would shrink our number of warheads, so that 5 years from now we would have under 1,000, which is still more than any reasonable person should ever want to use.
Terrifying.
But it would start moving us in the right direction. Mm-hmm. It would also establish a Department of Peace Building. We have cabinet level departments for all sorts of things, and so a Department of Peace Building. Again, this is primarily based on model legislation that members of Congress have proposed and has never gotten any traction. We sort of transposed it and brought it into the Populist Act as, how do we shift society in a way where we strive for win-win scenarios, where we resolve our differences peacefully and constructively, and then applies that to diplomacy around the world, establishing peace conferences. And we talked about restricting saying the United States will not develop lethal autonomous weapons, prompting the United States to try and organize an international treaty along these lines, same way that we did with the Geneva Convention after World War One. And the countries are like, look, poison gas, this is just too terrible. We're just not going to do that. We're all going to agree nobody's going to do this. And it has been remarkably successful for the last century, right? And we can do that with new terrible weapons.
That's right. Yeah, we did it with biological weapons. We've done it with other things, recognizing that it's either horrific in the local level or it has the potential to spread and damage everybody. And if we can't say that about the nuclear arsenal, then we can't say it about anything.
Yeah. So reining in the military-industrial complex, and and then some of our expanded military footprint around the globe. Essentially, one of the duties of nonviolence is to affirm consent, make sure that we're not taking advantage of anyone. And so Title 13 would require essentially a local referendum around our military bases around the globe. And if the people who live there, if they don't want us there, then we respect their decision and we move, we leave. I want to clarify, this would be a one-time Jubilee event to go around and take this survey. This is not an ongoing change in policy. This is as America reestablishing and reinventing itself to take stock. And so lots of good stuff, lots and lots of good stuff. And there's even more than that. And I'm going to listen to this later and be like, oh, I forgot to mention this really good policy and this really good policy. Right, like right to repair. Here's one I forgot. Are you familiar with right to repair?
Only vaguely.
Yeah, right. So this is the products that we buy that we're not able to fix, that they are, whether through digital locks or through just mechanical things where the manufacturers won't sell us the tools because they want to sell us brand new products.
That's right.
And so there's been a right to repair movement, and we can do this on a national level. Again, to empower people and consumers to fix things instead of just buying more of them. So there's all kinds of good policies. And so these things are going to resonate with different segments of your audience, right? And different aspects of the American population. And some people are going to be like, I don't care about that, but this one over here. And so as we're looking for action items, find the issues that are really important to you, that you care about, that you want to talk to people about. You're like, hey, we could fix this. The United States could get on track on this thing and go talk to people about it, right? Connect with the groups that you are already involved in on these issues, like, right to repair or whatever else, and say, here's how we can make traction on our issue. And there's descriptions of all these sorts of things on my website, votewithbrian.com. And so you can use AI to create content around these things. That we're creating little explainer videos on these various topics so that you can share them with people. And you can say, look, here's how we can fix these things. Congress, it's written down for you. We just need you to be a rubber stamp for the American people, the way you are too often a rubber stamp for the special interests.
Yes. So we're not even asking them to do anything different, just who to listen to.
The same but different, yes. Again, the purpose, is not to destroy, not to defeat any particular party or politician, but to convert Washington into service of the people. Right? This was always Gandhi's vision of not trying to help the British leave as friends, not trying to humiliate them, but he said, you're welcome to stay, but on the understanding that we are in charge and not you. And so this model sort of says the same thing to Congress. You're welcome to stay and keep your jobs, but with the understanding that we the people are in charge of the country. And so if you're willing to serve, you're welcome to stay. But if not, then your major party challenger has the opportunity. And so it's up to you. It's your decision. And yes, 3.5% of the 3.5% of the voters can collectively bargain, can make a credible offer and say, look, we're going to decide what Washington, D.C. looks like not just after this election, but the one after that and the one after that. And so you're going to have to make a decision. We can play this out real quickly. So we got the red team and the blue team. Right now, the red team has the trifecta, the House, the Senate, and the Oval Office. And so what's the incentive for the red team to cooperate? Well, if they cooperate and they deliver, then they become the most popular Congress in, generations. And their approval rating goes from where it hovers around, like 15, 20%. We might get up there 40, 50. The sky's the limit. It can go way up. So that's their incentive, is that they get to keep their jobs. What about the blue team? As we talked about, I think with the UBI back in the 70s, right, was the blue team had the incentive to see Richard Nixon and his plans for UBI fail to deny them a win. Well, this is where the game theory and muster day. So the blue team, if they think the red team is going to fail to deliver, then their incentive is to come forward and make this demand so that the populist fusion slate can swing over and endorse the Democrats who are demanding this thing. And so they have the opportunity to pick up, to channel all this populist energy in the country, all these people who are frustrated with the amount of control that big corporations have over our lives. And so it's in their best interest to cooperate. And if you can get both the red team and the blue team to acknowledge that it's in their best interest to cooperate, then there's nothing stopping them from passing the Populist Act before the election. Just as a quick parliamentary aside, the way that this would work is that they have what's called a committees of conference. When the House and Senate have different versions of a bill, they sit down and hash out the differences. And so that committee of conference can take whatever the underlying bill was and they can replace it with 2,000 pages of the Populist Act. And when they do that, it goes back to both chambers, the House and Senate, for an up or a down vote. And that's it. Congress uses this on various occasions when they want to force a binding vote on the members, and leadership says, here's what the deal is, take it or leave it. And they always take it. And so we, the people, can give them a take it or leave it offer as well. One that was written far away from the dirty fingers of the lobbyists and written to benefit the 100%. We can build an America for the 100%.
Amazing.
Yeah. It is. I have hope, John. I have hope that people are looking for a better way to do things in this country, and that people want to see Congress succeed at solving problems. And I believe that people are looking for a positive message. So
that's right. So people can go on to vote for Brian.
Sign up. No, you're not. I'm not running for anything. It's vote with Brian.
Vote with Brian. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah, I'm not running. I'm not a candidate for office. Again, the electoral politics.
That's right.
That way, representative democracy. That's the past. Collaborative democracy is the future.
And you're not getting rich from any of this stuff.
I live a life of Gandhian simplicity. No, I'm not getting rich from this.
And so they go on to vote with Brian. Thank you. And they sign up for the Fast for Peace. We can organize around that and join together and having a day of quiet and moving toward peace collectively. And maybe they can peruse some of the sections that are most important to them, the causes and issues that they are most keen to have addressed, and look to see what the Populist Act says about that, and then get their friends involved and reach out, use social media for good, and let people know about it, and we can come together in solidarity and make some well-needed updates to our social contract.
And one of your viewers might be the tipping point that that this country needs.
That's right. Yeah. They almost certainly are the tipping point. And so maybe that's you. Are there any other actions that you'd recommend people take?
Well, then the next thing is to reach out to your candidates for Congress, both the incumbent, the sitting member of Congress, and ask them if they're not there. If they're not there now, there very soon will be forms on the website to contact your members of Congress to ask them to pass the Populist Act, as well as to contact President Trump and ask him to support the Populist Act. But yes, to reach out to your candidates for Congress. They want your votes. What do you want in exchange for your votes? And this is where the collective bargaining comes in.
So wonderful. How exciting. Let's get out there and do this.
We can. We can.
We can.
Yes,
I
we
appreciate you so much. All of your incredible hard work, striving, and you're a genuine person. I can tell people that you are walking your talk with all of this, and that by itself is so rare with the people who are representing us in different ways. And I'm just very excited about what you are leading the way toward, and together we can make this change. We can flip this switch.
I think it was Archimedes who said, give me a lever long enough and a place to stand, and I can move the earth. Right? Well, love is leverage. If we can put enough love together, we will have the leverage to move the United States, and then by example, the rest of the world. And think of all the things that we could accomplish, that if we set a good example here in the United States, that we can change the world. We can move the world. So thanks again for the conversation, John. I always appreciate talking with you.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate you.
Ordinary people side by side, turning the fear, turning the tide. No fists raised, no hearts closed. Love is the path that courage chose. A gentler future can begin when every voice is welcomed in. With open hands we make it real, a politics that learns to heal. Thank you, Brian, for carrying on through tireless days from dusk to dawn, for fasting in the cause of peace, so fear may fade and suffering